What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our ACC football channel.
I did not believe that Willie Taggart was going to get fired despite losing 5 of his first 9 games and staring at another season with no postseason at Florida State. I thought that Florida State would give him one more year. That said, I was not shocked or surprised by the outcome delivered by the Florida State administration. They obviously were able to gather the funds from the boosters, the alumni, and the supporters to seal Willie's fate. Willie Taggart's performance at Florida State on the football field was deplorable. He seems like a great guy, a tremendous leader of young men in many ways. But for some reason, he just was not able to parlay his success at Western Kentucky, South Florida, and I will call his performance at Oregon an incomplete grade. He went 7-5 with pretty much a 7-5 roster at Oregon in his one season. But at Florida State, in 21 games, the Seminoles were unprepared. They were overmatched. They were overmatched by much lesser teams in regards to roster talent, and this continued on and on and on. You could bookend the beginning of the Willie Taggart era at Florida State. 3 points against Virginia Tech. Opening night in Tallahassee, new coach. Your team's got to be fired up, ready to go. New coach, new offense, new era at home against Virginia Tech. They scored 3 points. So the conclusion could have been after that game, Virginia Tech's going to be really good this year. What Virginia Tech inevitably produced was its worst defense in 30 plus years under Bud Foster. So Virginia Tech was not the common denominator. It was Florida State under Willie Taggart. And that would prove out throughout 2018 and here through 9 games of 2019. The team was routinely unprepared, unmotivated, was still picking up stupid penalties late in the season last year. 10 men on the field, 12 men on the field, false starts, both pre-snap and post-snap penalties galore. Just looked unmotivated, unprepared, not ready to play big-time football. And again, this was against a conference and is against a conference that is not the Big Ten or the SEC or even the Big 12. It's against a weak conference. Willie Taggart's teams played decent football 3 times out of 12 games last year. They beat Boston College by 1 point. They played their best game against Wake Forest in beating a pretty good Demon Deacons team 38-17, and they blew a game against Miami in which they led by 20 points and lost by 1. Those were their 3 decent performances. Other than that, it was deplorable. This year, they blew an 18-point lead against Boise State. They almost blew a game against Louisiana Monroe and had to thank the place kicker for Louisiana Monroe, who blew a PAT in overtime. They looked okay in losing to Virginia. They looked okay in defeating Louisville and NC State, but we've seen what those 2 teams, especially NC State, are incapable of doing here in 2019. So the improvement showed on the scoreboard and in the win column in recent weeks. They played a decent game at Wake, 22-20. But the progress certainly hasn't been there. And if you bookend week 1, 2018 against Virginia Tech in 3 points and what they showed against Miami last weekend, it seemed very similar. 10 penalties, 9 sacks, only 203 yards of total offense. In a game in 2019, 203 yards out of a Kendall Briles offense. And he was supposed to be the difference. So, if I were running the show, I most likely would have let Willie Taggart finish out 2019. Then I would have made a tough decision. And then he may have been back for 2020 with his head squarely on the chopping block. But Florida State decided to let him go. So now there's a number of candidates out there in play. Some of them legit, some of them not. I'm understanding that Urban Meyer is not a legit candidate for this job, because if he was, and if he is, he obviously would be the choice. So he's my number one candidate if he's truly a candidate. But these are the names that I've gathered and would love to get your thoughts. Surprisingly, Bob Stoops is being talked about, the former Oklahoma coach. Matt Campbell doing a fine job at Iowa State. PJ Fleck tearing it up currently at Minnesota. Mark Stoops at Kentucky, a program that's improved year by year by year. Brent Venables, always talked about when there are head coaching vacancies. He, of course, the defensive coordinator mastermind at Clemson. And then to a lesser degree, we've heard Memphis coach Mike Norvell, former Georgia and Miami coach Mark Richt, Mike Leach, Washington State, what a job he's done there after doing an exceptional job at Texas Tech, Gus Malzahn at Auburn, and Clemson offensive coordinator Jeff Scott. Here are my thoughts about some of these coaches. Bob Stoops would be an easy selection and would be a safe selection. We only need to go back to Mack Brown's rehiring at North Carolina after he built that program back in the late 90s to see that this can happen, that a coach comes back after a layoff. And for Bob Stoops, it would only be 2 years. For Mack Brown, I believe it was 6 years. That Bob Stoops, if he's got the fire and the motivation, and he would have the brand name behind him to go and recruit, could be successful at Florida State. PJ Fleck turned around Western Michigan, turned them into a Cotton Bowl, New Year's Six bowl team out of the MAC, and look at what he's doing in Minnesota. Brent Venables, mastermind on defense, and there's always hesitation when it's a first-time head coach, regardless of how effective that particular coach has been in the coordinator role. But consider Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, Dabo Swinney, just to name a few elite coaches. And of course, Ryan Day has yet to prove that, but I think we all expect that to continue at Ohio State, that the stigma of not hiring a name coach, a proven, experienced head coach to an elite program, that has been set aside by some recent hires, Swinney, Riley, and Day in particular. So Brent Venables very much in play as well. I named the other guys. My choice would be Matt Campbell of Iowa State. He's done an exceptional job with little to go on there at Iowa State. His peers speak about him in glowing terms, that he is a bright, up-and-coming coach, and that's what I would go for if I was Florida State. It would not be Bob Stoops, who would do a fine job, I'm sure. And it would not be Mark Richt, who I believe gets a bum rap for his work at Georgia. But based on the way he finished at Miami, his heart just doesn't seem to be in the game. Pardon the pun. Mike Leach, interesting choice. It depends how you want the face of your program to look, the brand of your program. For me, it's Matt Campbell. He would be my clear number one choice. And Brent Venables would be number two. Would have recruiting ties to where Florida State would recruit there in Florida and in the Southeast. Is a mastermind on defense, knows the conference, knows everything that needs to be done, fires up his team, is got respect from everyone, and would going into that Florida State situation. My thoughts on the Willie Taggart replacement, would love to hear from you.